How's it going, everyone? I am back with another video. This is going to be, I guess you want to call it part two of my full season predictions video for the NFL season, the 2025 season. I covered the AFC in, I guess, if you want to call it part one. So this part is going to be covering the NFC, and then I'm going to make a separate video that covers my award prediction winners and my playoff bracket. So if you haven't checked out my AFC predictions, feel free to do that if you're interested. But in this video, I'll be going over the NFC. So how it works here. So we'll start off with the Rams, for example. So each team, I have all of the teams' columns and my predicted standings for the divisions blacked out here. We're going to go one at a time. So I have weeks 1 through 18, each team's opponent laid out. If you see just the team name, that means it's a home game for the whatever team we're going over. If you see the letter a lowercase a in front of the team name, that means it's a road game. Excuse me here. So, for example, you see that here at Philly. So that's an example there. Houston, the Rams had them at home. So if the cell is shaded green, that means I'm predicting a win. If it's shaded red, I'm predicting a loss. And then obviously you have the bye week. I just left that white, so obviously you can't win or lose, against the bye week. But yeah, that probably missing something here that I'll remember. But anyway, I'll just jump into it here. So yeah, the Rams. I am pretty high on the Rams this season. The one thing that concerns me with them, well, not the one thing, more than one concern, I guess, but the big concern I have with the Rams is their. I'm sorry, just it's got a text. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, sorry. The one thing with the Rams is the one big thing I have of concern with them is the Stafford back injury. What the hell is going on with that? It's been reported that he was okay. Now it's reported they're going to have to work through it throughout the season. So that is very concerning to me. If he's not able to play, Jimmy G's the backup. So Jimmy G, I think, is actually a good fit with the Rams. He actually played really good when he played Week 18 against the Seahawks, and the Rams played their backups for that game. And Jimmy G actually played pretty good. He nearly won the game at the end there. But yeah, the Rams. I'm just gonna knock on wood for Stafford. My desk is wooden here, so I'm actually gonna knock on wood and hope he stays healthy the whole year. Matthew Stafford is, one of the tougher quarterbacks in the league, so if he's out, it's gonna have to be pretty significant. Hopefully, it doesn't affect his playing anyway negatively. Yeah, and then the Rams, obviously Devontae Adams is the big offseason addition. I think that's a really good fit for the Rams. Him and Puka are going to be lighting it up. Kyren Williams, of course. So I'm really high in the Rams. In general, their offense, I think, should be really productive. Of course, McVay is going to get them rolling. And Chris Shula and that defense last season, I was pleasantly surprised at how well that defense played. I thought they were going to struggle for most of the year, especially at Front losing Aaron Donald to retirement. And that was really not the case. They were really productive last year. And they got better as the year went on. And I think they're going to be even better this season. So I'm pretty high in the Rams, as you can see here. I had them finishing at 12-5, which again, that's assuming Stafford stays healthy, hopefully. So yeah, I have them winning or not at Houston. I have them beating Houston at home, week 1. Could go either way, but I'll give them that one. I certainly think they'll beat the Titans. At Philly, that game could go either way. I think it'll be close, but I'll give Philly that one. Then I have them beating Indy, San Fran, Indy. I wouldn't be shell shocked if they lost that game. They should win that one. San Fran, I have them splitting with. I don't think they'll sweep them or get swept by them, but who knows? At Baltimore, that's probably, I'm sure the Ravens will be favored in that game, barring something like, an injury or something of that nature, a significant injury. But I have them upsetting the Ravens. As I talked about in part one, I kind of had to balance out some, the math here with some predicting wins and losses for every team. I think I originally had the Rams losing that game, but the Ravens, I forget exactly what, but trying to balance out the win loss in another team, I gave the Ravens a win where I had them losing, I think, and then I gave them a loss against the Rams to even it out. something like that. So it's just trying to balance out the win loss with all the teams here. They really should beat the Jags in London, but the Jags, for whatever reason, are like the greatest team in NFL history when they play in London. So I'll give them an upset loss there. And another reason, do I really see the Rams starting out at 6-1? I could see that, but I'll give them 5-2 to start the year. Coming off the bye against the Saints, they should win that game in a blowout. At San Fran, that's when I had them losing. Seattle, Tampa, Carolina, Arizona. That's 4 wins I have for them. The Lions, I have a loss there. Could go either way. Seattle on the road, I have them winning. And at Atlanta, I have an upset loss there. And Arizona to close out the year, I have a win. So I had the Rams at 12-5. I'm very optimistic on the Rams, but obviously a large part of that depends on the health of Stafford. Okay, Seattle. This is a tough one. What do I have them at? I have them at 6-11. So that's pretty, compared to last season, that's a pretty significant drop off. Now, I think the Seahawks, well, defensively, I think they'll be really solid. I think their defense is going to keep them in a lot of the games, and probably a reason why they win some of the games they do this season. Offensively is the concern I have. I've never been a big Sam Darnold guy. Obviously, he played great last year with I almost said the Rams, the Vikings. However, I don't think that's going to translate over to Seattle. I don't think he'll be as bad as the Sam Darnold we're used to from the Jets days, for example. But I don't think it'll be close to how he played with the Vikings. A large part of their season depends on what version of Darnold we're getting. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of the Clint Kubiak hire for the Seahawks. He runs a very interesting and unique offense. He loves to run the ball. He's a run first, pass second offensive coordinator. He's not afraid to run the ball, but it's like third and medium. He's not afraid to run it at second and long. That's going to be, honestly, I think Metcalf wanted out, anyway, prior to that hire. I think, especially with that hire, Metcalf's like, yeah, all right, I don't want to be run blocking. I want to get receptions, touchdowns, a lot of yards. So, no offense to Clint Kubiak, but get me out of here, please. If Sam Darnold plays like he did last season for the Vikings, I honestly could see the Seahawks winning. Honestly, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say like 9-10 games. But I think we're going to get, a better Sam Darnold than the Jets version, but, not nearly as good as the Sam Darnold on the Vikings. Cooper Kupp, that was obviously that's a good addition. A lot of questions around him, aging, is he declining, some injury, history in recent years. Him, JSN. By the way, the Seahawks came out absolutely nowhere for the Cooper Kupp sweepstakes. I don't even think they were rumored. And then just out of nowhere, Cooper Kupp to Seattle. That was random. But him, JSN. That's two good weapons for Darnold there. Obviously, you get Kenneth Walker in the run game. So they have some solid weapons offensively. Defensively, I think, as I mentioned, they'll be pretty solid. But going on the schedule here, I had them losing to the Niners at home, losing to Pittsburgh. I think, especially the Pittsburgh game, that'll be a low scoring, grinded out game. I had them beating the Saints, and then I have them going on a rough patch here. I had them losing at the Cardinals. I had them losing to the Bucs, the Jags, the Texans, and the Commanders. Now, do I really see them starting 1-7? Probably not. They're realistically most likely going to have a better record than that 8 games into the season, but trying to balance everything out here with the other teams. That's unfortunately for the Seahawks what I have them, at 8 games into the season. They very well could win. I don't think it's out of the question they'll win week 1 against Niners. They could win at Pittsburgh, but actually I think the Steelers should win that one. Fairly confident there. Could upset the Cardinals. They swept them last year. Could beat the Bucs. Sure, I think I had them beating the Jags originally, and I switched it, making some edits here. I think they'll lose to the Texans, but that'll be close potentially. Coming off the bye, I think I had them beating the Commanders originally and switched it up to give the Commanders an extra win because I had the Commanders. I had to do some edits because originally I had them in a record I didn't think they would be getting. The Cardinals, I have them beating. At the Rams, I had them losing. See, so they're starting to get better, in my predictions as the season, after their bye here toward the back end of the year. I had them beating the Titans. Think their defense will ball out in that game. Give Cam Ward company a tough one there. I have them losing to the Vikings, the Falcons. They probably should beat the Falcons, but I'll give the Falcons that win there. Have them beating the Colts, Rams, Panthers, and then losing to the Niners to end their season out and finish 6-11. Which again, they went 10-7 last year, and you can argue they upgraded the roster. Honestly, I think Geno, or rather Darnold, getting Darnold compared to Geno is, you can argue it's a lateral move. Obviously, Darnold's younger, but I think Darnold. I just don't think he's gonna be like the Sam Darnold from last season. But if he is, look out for the Seahawks. They could be. I mean, they could be a sleeper team. Even though I have them at only 6 wins, they seriously could be a pretty good 6-win team. So that's the Seahawks. Okay, the Niners. This might be a bit of a surprise. I have the Niners at 11-6. Now, a big part of that right off the bat is their schedule. Their schedule is extremely favorable. Let's just go through the games that they really, no offense to these teams, that they really should win, and they're just flat out better by a good margin than. All right, the Saints, they really should win that one. The Jags, the Giants, the Browns, the Titans. So what's that? 1, 2, 3. So that's 5 wins right off the bat against teams, pretty not so great teams, most likely this season, at least win-loss wise. They should at least split with the Seahawks, you would think. So that's 6. Let's see. Then the Panthers, you probably imagine they beat them, but that could be close. That's 7. So that's 7 wins they really should get just from being flat out the better team. The Seahawks, again, that game could go either way, but I've been winning the opener. I'm starting 4-0, beating the Saints, Cardinals, Jags. They could lose to the Jags and Cardinals, and maybe even the Seahawks, but I think at worst they'll be 2-2 4 weeks into the year. I have them losing to the Rams and Bucs. They probably should beat the Bucs, but why not? I'll give the Bucs that one. Falcons, I have them winning against Houston. I have them losing against. It'll be a close game. Could win that one. Giants, I have them winning. Rams, I have them winning. Cardinals, I have a loss. Panthers, Browns, I have 2 wins. Certainly beating the Titans coming off the bye. The Colts, they really should win, but I think that'll be, again, the Colts are still fighting for the playoffs. Actually, I think, the Colts might be basically eliminated at this point. Okay, so yeah, Indy will, borderline be eliminated, but whatever. I'll still give them that win. Let me make sure my math is correct here really quick. Hang on. Where are you? Okay, good. I have the Titans losing to the Seahawks. Good. I just want to make sure that corresponded correctly. Where was I? Yeah, okay, yeah. Then I have them losing to the Bears in an upset. I think that'll just be a game. Ben Johnson, the offense, start clicking. Well, not start clicking, but click really well. Then I had them beating the Seahawks the end of the year at 11-6. So yeah, the Niners. Actually, one big concern I have with them is their receivers are extremely banged up right now. I mean, like nearly every receiver on their roster is injured, so that's kind of concerning. Hopefully, obviously that gets fixed before the year starts here. Their defense, they lost a decent amount of free agents too. The Niners did, but Robert Saleh, I think this defense will be, one of the better defenses in the league. Saleh, a lot of people are going to look at him with the Jets. Obviously, he didn't do too great as a head coach, although you can argue he really didn't have, a quarterback until, Rodgers, and he got fired extremely early into last season. But he had his defense hit this, before he got fired a couple weeks into this year. And last year, he had his defense playing extremely well. And obviously the Niners, that's kind of where he made his name. I think the Niners defense is going to be, again, one of the better defenses this year. So I have the Niners. Also, I think Purdy will have a pretty solid year. I don't think he played as bad as, a 6-11 quarterback typically plays last year, but I think Purdy will have a pretty solid year this year too. So I have the Niners at 11-6. The Cardinals, they're a tricky team. I have the Cardinals at 8-9. I think they'll have a year similar to what they had last year, and they finished 8-9 last year, so I had the same record. I could see 9, maybe even 10 wins for this team, but I'll have them at 8-9 here. They really should beat the Saints week 1, but I just have a random gut feeling the Saints offense is just going to be extremely efficient in that game. The Saints are going to have an upset win week 1. That's just kind of what my gut's telling me there, even though the Cardinals really should beat them. Then I have them beating the Panthers. I had them losing to the Niners, beating the Seahawks and Titans. Losing to the Colts could go either way, but I'll give them a loss there. I have them beating the Packers in an upset, even though that makes me a bit uneasy because the Packers absolutely annihilated them last year. Coming off the bye at the Cowboys, I have them winning. I think Gannon's defense will play really well that game. Have them losing to the Seahawks on the road, beating the Niners, losing to the, or sorry, not losing to, beating the Jags. Then I have them going on a rough patch here to end the year. So actually, I have them in pretty good shape going into week 13. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so I have them at 7-4 entering week 13, which might be a bit of a surprise to people. That happens. Then I had them losing to the Bucks, Rams, and Houston. So then, losing streak 7-7, 8-7. I think they'll beat the Falcons. Then I had them losing to the Bengals and Rams to end the year. So again, I have them at 8-9, but at one point I also had them at 7-4. So the Cardinals, kind of a sleeper team. Not too many people talking about them, I don't think, but very well could be a sleeper team, maybe a potential playoff team if they can get a couple more wins here. But yeah, I think the Cardinals defense will actually have a really solid year. I think Gannon's actually a pretty underrated defensive coach. Obviously, everyone, especially Eagles fans, just remember him for, the Eagles against the Rams, the Chiefs in the 2022 Super Bowl, where, the Chiefs put up 38 on them. And, the Eagles, well, actually, the first half, they didn't play that bad, but the second half, the Chiefs just went up and down and scored at will. So, a lot of Eagles fans, rightfully have given up 30, well, sort of 31 because they got 7 off the Hurts fumble. Obviously, Gannon can't control that. But, allowing that many points in the Super Bowl, especially in the second half in a tight game, I guess, you can blame Gannon rightfully so. But that's against Andy Reid in the Super Bowl. As much as I hate Mahomes, I call him mid-Holmes. I think he's been a mid-game manager for 2 seasons in a row now. 2022, he actually played really well. He won MVP that year. It was against Reid and Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Even though Mahomes has kind of played extremely subpar, to put it nicely, in his Super Bowl career. Honestly, outside of the Eagles game, he's borderline played like ass. Obviously, the Bucks Super Bowl. I'm getting off topic here, but the Bucks Super Bowl he played bad. Obviously, the Eagles Super Bowl was absolutely abysmal. That Niners Super Bowl he did not play very well until the fourth quarter. The Eagles Super Bowl is kind of the only Super Bowl from start to finish he played pretty well in, I think. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. But I think Gannon's a really underrated defensive mind. My point is, I don't think he should be slandered from that one game. Obviously, not a great performance, but it's against Reid and Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. I believe they were the top scoring offense in the league that year in the Super Bowl. So that's valid logic to maybe not have the best performance. But yeah, I think this defense play well. I just think the offense will be kind of hot one week, then cold the next week, just inconsistent throughout the year, throughout certain games even. Yeah. I'm just trying to think here for the Cardinals. Yeah, I just think the offense is going to be similar to how it did last year, where just hot, then it's cold, then hot, cold. It looks good one drive, then bad the next. It's just like that pretty much throughout the year there. Big year for Kyler, though. What's going to happen with him? if it's they finish under 500 and make playoffs. It'll be interesting for Kyler in the offseason there. So the standings here in the NFC West, I had the Rams winning it at 12-5, the Niners at second at 11-6, the Cardinals in third at 8-9, and the Seahawks in fourth at 6-11. I feel fairly confident with the standings, although if Stafford, a lot of this depends on Stafford's health. If he's injured and they have to have Jimmy G play a decent amount of games, I honestly might move the Niners into first. But for now, it's my preseason predictions. I'll just keep the standings as they are there for now. Okay, moving on to the NFC East here. So I have the Eagles having another really good regular season. I had them at 12-5. I do think on paper you can argue they will not argue. This is an argument. They did lose a good amount of pieces this offseason, especially defensively. So you could honestly argue maybe they got a bit worse on paper. However, I think they're still obviously one of the better teams. Their offense pretty much stayed the same. Their defense kind of took some hits. But Vic Fangio, I think, will have that defense playing extremely well again. Probably not at the level it did last season, but I think, again, they'll be one of the top defenses in the league. Their offense, I think, will be the same. Obviously, Kellen Moore, I actually think, is an extremely underrated offensive coach. So maybe they'll miss him throughout parts of the year. We obviously saw when Shane Steichen left the following year, the Eagles really missed his play calling on the offensive side of the ball. Same thing with Gannon defensively, too. I was just talking about Gannon, getting shit on by Eagles fans. They obviously missed him the 2023 season, especially second half when they collapsed after starting 10-1. God, they had my old guy Matt Patricia calling plays in the in the back stretch of the season there for the Eagles. But yeah, now I just got off topic again. What was I saying? Yeah, anyway, I think their offense will be maybe take a bit of a drop off. I don't think Barkley is going to, explode to the point as he did last year. And I think he'll have another really good year. A decent amount of people are saying injury concerns for or having injury concerns for Barkley, given his workload last season. I honestly thought he was like the unanimous top pick in fantasy. With a couple of drafts I've had, he's fell to like actually he was the first pick in I think one draft, but at like two others he's fell to like 3 or 4, I want to say. But anyway, I think their offense will be similar. I think they'll be a really good team overall anyway. I have them beating the Cowboys to open the season. I wouldn't be shell-shocked if they lost that game, but I think they'll win it. At KC, I'll give them a win there. Could go either way, but I still like the way they match up against the Chiefs. The Rams, I had them beating. Corresponds to my Rams schedule there. The Bucs, I have them losing to the Bucs. The Bucs, Todd Bowles is the head coach of the Bucs. Is like really so. Todd Bowles is a really good defensive coach. Obviously, his aggressive scheme kind of bites him sometimes, but the majority of the time, I would say it works. Todd Bowles last year, they played week 4, and that was I believe it was week 4 if I remember right. And that was when the Eagles were still kind of figuring some things out, and I believe they were missing A.J. Brown that game. And the Bucs were up like 24-0 on them, and I think the Eagles had like literally like 0 or maybe 1 or like 3 or 9 yards, something like that, and the Bucs had like 200 something. It was an insane stat like that. But Todd Bowles, I'll talk about it with the Bucs more. But he's been really weird as the head coach of the Bucs. They start off odd, and they lose in the middle of the year, and then they get odd again at the end of the year. It feels like. But anyway, I think Todd Bowles and company will be able to beat Philly at home in that one. Very well could win for the Eagles, but I'll give them a loss there. I had them beating Denver and the Giants. They could beat the Vikings, but I had the Vikings taking care of business at home there. That'll be close, I think. But I think Kevin O'Connell in his offense will have a good game there with J.J. McCarthy and company. I had them beating the Giants again. Coming off the bye, they probably should beat the Packers. But I honestly think that the Packers really should have beaten them, I think, in the playoffs last season. They gave them, you can argue the Rams too, but the Packers defense really did more than enough to win the game in that wild card game. Just the offensive line, the receiver injuries, then Jordan Love was off. The Packers offense cost them the game. Also, the Eagles did get bailed out on the opening kickoff with that. From what I remember, that was a bad call with the fumble, giving them the ball there. So the Packers caught some bad breaks in that game. They still nearly won on the road in Philly. They probably gave the Eagles, the best shot out of any team. Again, you can argue the Rams that kind of took a late surge right at the end of the game, versus the Packers were in it from the start, pretty much until late in the game when they failed that fourth down. But anyway, I had them losing to the Packers there. Could go either way. I had them beating the Lions, losing to the Cowboys. I think they'll split with the Cowboys. They very well could sweep them, but I think they'll split. Then I had them getting hot here. I had them on a win streak against the sorry, I'm just making sure things correspond here. Against the Bears, Chargers, Raiders, Washington, and Bills. They very well could lose some of those games, especially the Bills game. Maybe I think they'll win those 4 games. The Bills game I'm a bit iffy on because she's on the road, but I'll give them that one. That could be a big Saquon game against the Bills. Then I have them losing to the Commanders to end the year at 12-5 there. I'll talk about more why I had them losing that game once I get to the end of this video here. Okay, Dallas, the Cowboys. They're an interesting team. I have them at 8-9. I originally had them at 9-8. Then when I made some edits, I changed it to 8-9. I'm like, actually, I think 8-9's. I feel a bit more comfortable there. They're an interesting team. I could see them really clicking, maybe get around 10 wins. But I just think that Brian Schottenheimer, I guess we'll have to see. But like many, probably most people, I was a bit skeptical of the hire. Never been a head coach before, and you just promote him from within after Mike McCarthy. Probably should have just re-signed Mike McCarthy, honestly, but that's okay. Some bit skeptical. I really like the George Pickens trade for the Cowboys, so I think George Pickens is going to have a monster year. Now that also gives Lamb a bit of breathing room with a legitimate number 2 receiver in there too. So Lamb and Pickens both could have monster years. Dak, some injury, maybe not injury concern, but how well is he going to bounce back after the injury? In 21, I think it was a more significant injury in 20 he suffered. He had a really good year in 21, so that's we kind of have some history there. I think the offense could have a solid year, but I think it'll kind of be up and down throughout the year. The Cowboys defense, now Matt Eberflus, obviously it did not work out as a head coach of the Bears. I actually like Matt Eberflus as a defensive coach. He had the Bears defense really since, well, he did a good job with the Colts too. That's why he got the head coaching gig with the Bears. But he had the Bears defense really since like the back half of the 23 season. He had the Bears defense playing at an extremely high level. I think the Cowboys could have a pretty sneaky, underrated defense this year that could keep them in some games. The offense is up and down. I think Dallas, I think their floor is probably like 7, and their ceiling is probably around 10, maybe 11 if you push it a bit. So, I feel pretty good around 8 and 9. Maybe you can argue their floor is like 6 and 11 if things kind of go really south. But yeah, just going through the schedule here. At Philly, I have them losing that. I have them beating the Giants. Very well could lose that game too, honestly. Giants, I think, not underrated. It could be a potential sleeper team, as I'll get to shortly here. I had them losing to the Bears. Very well could win that. I had them losing to the Packers. They probably should beat the Jets, but again, when I was doing some edits, I had the Jets at 4-13. I'm like, I kind of feel pretty good about five wins, 5-12 for the Jets, and I'm like, whatever. The Cowboys will probably blow a road. Probably this will be a game that they blow. So I'm like, I'll give them that one. So I had them losing to the Jets, beating the Panthers and Washington. So I have them at 3-4 right now. losing to Denver on the road, that'll be a tough one for the offense, I think. Have them beating the Cardinals, have them beating the Raiders, have them beating the Eagles. Now they're getting a bit hot, but then they run into the Chiefs. Well, actually, rather, the Chiefs run into them, at least scheduling wise, because it's at Dallas. They very well could win that game, but I'll get the Chiefs that one. I had them losing to the Lions, beating the Vikings. I think that'll be a good game from Eberflus, his defense there. Losing to the Chargers, Commanders, and then beating the Giants, finish out 8-9. I kind of feel comfortable with the number 8-9 for the Cowboys here. I'm kind of confident with that. Some other teams like the Seahawks, I'm a bit iffy on as far as my record prediction, but 8-9, I kind of feel confident with the Cowboys there. Okay, Washington, the Commanders. I have them at as a 10-7 team here, so I've them dropping off 2 games win loss wise from last season. I just think their offense is going to regress a little bit. I don't think Jane Daniels is going to hit necessarily a sophomore slump, but I don't think he'll be quite as productive as he was last year. I do think Debo actually they could package him and he could be really productive, and be really effective for them. The trade they made for Tunsil, that obviously will be a boost to the line. That was kind of, a mess throughout last year at parts. The defense for the Commanders, not too great on. I thought they were going to trade for Hendrickson, honestly rather, but Hendrickson re-signed with the Bengals. The Commanders defense, I think it'll be like it was last year. Not the greatest, not the worst. Probably, in like the 20th around there, maybe a bit, like 22 somewhere. Wherever the Commanders rank, I feel like they ranked in that general ballpark last year defensively. I think it'll be similar this year. And the Commanders, a lot of their wins last season came, at the last minute, come from behind, thrilling victory, one-score game. I think they'll lose some of those games this year. For example, like I had them losing to the Falcons. I think that'll probably be a close one-score game of the Falcons upsetting them. Versus last year, they might win that type of game. This year, I had them losing it. But anyway, I had them beating the Giants week 1. I actually almost picked the Giants to win this game. I would not at all be surprised if the Giants beat them. There's part of my gut is saying the Giants might win that game, but I'll give the Commanders that one. I had them losing to the Packers, beating the Raiders, and as I just mentioned, losing to the Falcons. I had them beating the Chargers, which I had them losing originally, but changed it. I had them beating the Bears, the Chargers and Bears game, and the Falcons game. Even the Raiders, honestly, any of these games up until pretty much any of these games up through week 8, I think can go either way, honestly, for them. I had them losing to the Cowboys and Chiefs, beating the Seahawks, the Lions. Another thing to note, if you see an asterisk with an abbreviation in front of it, that means it's an international game. So in this case, it's they're playing the Dolphins in Madrid. I had them winning that game, beating Denver at home off the bye, then running into a bit of a losing streak here. I had them losing to the Vikings, getting upset by the Giants. And I had them losing to the Eagles. I had them beating Dallas, and I had them beating Philly to end the year. So I had the Commanders at 10-7. I kind of feel confident with that number. They very well could be another 12-win team, but I think at minimum they'll be like a 9-ish win team. Okay, Giants. Okay, so the Giants, as a Patriots fan, I almost, keyword almost, feel bad for the Giants with this schedule. This schedule is absolutely brutal. Now, as I mentioned, I only have the Giants at 5-12. I think they'll actually be a really good team for only a 5-win team. Their roster is actually like pretty solid overall. So Russell Wilson, I think, is a good fit with Dayball. Obviously, Jackson Dart looked extremely good in the preseason. Then they get Jameson there too. Their quarterback room is actually really solid. They just let Tommy DeVito go. My team, the Patriots, just picked them up actually. Tommy Cutlets, love Tommy Cutlets. But yeah, and then the defense, their defense looks solid too. Shane Bowen, I think, is a pretty solid DC. The Giants' defensive line can actually like single-handedly keep them or maybe even win them games alone. I mean, Carter and Dexter Lawrence is an absolutely insane combo. We saw that, especially against the Seahawks last year at Seattle, the Giants' defensive line, was a big part of why they won that game. So the Giants could be a very sneaky team here. They just have an absolute gauntlet and just brutal schedule. Um, Again, I had them losing to the Commanders, Cowboys, Chiefs, Chargers. So 0-4. I've been beating the Saints. So 1-4. Losing to the Eagles. I've been beating Denver in an upset on the road. I think that'll be kind of similar to the Seattle game. Everyone, well, not everyone, but most people will expect Denver to win, but the Giants will pull off the upset. I've been losing to the Eagles, Niners, Bears, beating the Packers in an upset. Lose to the Lions, my team, the Patriots. Pretty sure it's a Monday Night Football game. Beating the Commanders after the bye, losing to the Vikings, beating the Raiders, then losing to the Cowboys. So I have them at 5-12. I could see them beating Washington, maybe even Dallas. I think they'll split though. Or actually, I had Dallas sweeping them. They very well could split with Dallas. Okay, yeah, I have Dallas sweep. Okay, yeah, I have the Dallas sweeping. I'm just making sure everything lines up there. Um, could beat the Vikings, I guess. Could beat the Bears. I just think the Giants, even though I have them at 5-11, a lot of their losses, or at least some of them, I think they'll probably have a couple bad blowout losses, but I think some of their losses will be pretty close, and they'll just be on the short end of the stick as far as win loss in those games. One possession games, for example. Uh, I think Dayball is probably getting. Actually, I think if they go 5-12, I really don't see how they bring Dayball back. They might even fire him in the middle of the year, depending on how things are going. Same with Joe Shine, their general manager. I'm honestly surprised they kept Dayball last year. Now, obviously, you can argue Dayball isn't really a quarterback. He did really good his first year, Daniel Jones, and the next year was, just a carousel of quarterbacks. And the Giants still in 23 actually, for the disaster they had, they went 6-11, I believe, either that or 7-10. I think it was 6-11. Honestly, that was a they. Okay, now this is bothering me. I got to see if it's 6 or 7. Hang on here. Um, let's see. Um, no, not this season. 2 seasons ago. Okay, they went 6-11 2 years ago. Honestly, you can say that was obviously, it's a they made the playoffs, made the divisional round his first year, so you can say that was a drop off, obviously. But they, considering all the injuries, it could have been a lot worse, I think. Then last year is obviously a disaster. So this is kind of a make or break year for him. Same with Joe Shine, the general manager. I think they'll probably both get fired. But who knows? We'll have to see what happens. Maybe, Dayball is feeling the heat, Shine's feeling the heat, so they throw Dart in. Russell Wilson's struggling. Sorry, I'm fidgeting with the pen here. Just dropped my pen tab. I don't know where the hell that just went, but that's okay. I'll get it after. But yeah, I had them at 5-12. Just a brutal, tough schedule for the Giants this year. So my division standings, I feel fairly confident, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, how the division will finish. I have the Eagles in first, the Commanders in second, Dallas in third, and then the Giants in last at 5-12. Um, Fairly confident record wise with all these NFC's teams here. Okay, the NFC South. I have the Bucks. Yeah, okay, yeah. They're still 10. I have the Bucks at 10-7 here. Um, on the Bucks are kind of a sleeper team for me in the NFC. However, I think Todd Bowles, again, I'm not the biggest Todd Bowles as a head coach guy. He obviously had that good year, the Jets, when they went 10-6, and then outside of that, the Jets, uh, you know, weren't the best team under Todd Bowles as a head coach there. Um, and yeah, him and Byron Leftwich, I think, ruined Tom Brady's last season. Todd Bowles is so conservative with some of his head coaching decisions that year, and Byron Leftwich is just a disaster. And they historically were awful running the ball. So there's that. As I mentioned, Todd Bowles of the Bucks. He started off 2-0 all 3 years as the head coach, and then he finds his team. He's I think is let's see, with Brady, he was 3-5 at one point, and then they ended up finishing 8-9, which absolutely irritates me because it's the only losing record Brady's had his entire not even NFL football career. I understand they benched the starter because that game was meaningless seeding wise, but still, it technically was a loss on Brady because he started the game. So technically, Brady's last regular season game, he lost to Desmond Ritter. Like, bruh. Anyway, they get in a slump in the middle of the year and then they get hot at the end of the year. It's basically how Todd Bowles' Tampa years have gone as head coach. So once again, I had them starting off hot. Actually, surprised, I had them at 5-1. That I think though it's 4-2 is probably more likely, but why not? I'll say 5-1. I had them beating the Falcons to open the year. Very well could lose that. Losing at Houston, could win that, but I'll give them a loss there. They really should beat the Jets, but that game, I actually attempted to give the Jets an upset win there because that game on paper has the Denver game week 3 written all over it. Everyone thought the Bucs were going to beat the Broncos last year. The Broncos were not expected to be good last year, overexceeded I think everyone's expectations. And the Bucs were 2-0, and Denver just absolutely dominated them week 3. So I could see a scenario like that, but I'll give them the win there against the Jets. As I mentioned, talking about the Eagles, I had them winning that game. I had them beating the Seahawks and the Niners. And then I had them losing to the Lions and then having a bad loss against the Saints there. Coming off the bye, there's my pen cap. I found it. I have them coming off the bye, I have them beating my team, losing to the Bills, Rams, beating the Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, losing to the Panthers, Dolphins, and then to end the year, solid win against the Panthers. So I had them at 10-7. Very well could win both these games. I think they'll lose both these. Probably should beat the Saints that game, but I'll give them a loss there. I think at most their ceiling's probably 12 wins. I think I actually had them at 11-6 originally, but I docked them one doing some edits. So I had the Bucs at 10-7. I feel fairly confident with that record there. Up next, the Falcons. The Falcons are an interesting team this year. Pretty much everyone is just no one's really talking about the Falcons. Understandably, last year they were getting a lot of hype with Kirk Cousins and company. I had them winning the division last year. I had them at 10-7 and the Bucs at 9-8, if I remember right. Obviously, the Falcon, and it looked like that's how it was going to play out, especially after they swept the Bucs the second time around when they beat them to complete the sweep. It was like, all right, yeah, the Falcons really should win this division. They were, I believe, 6-3 at one point. Then obviously Kirk Cousins really started to struggle, and the Falcons only ended up finishing 8-9. Penix, I actually thought, just stats wise, it's not, jaw dropping. But if I remember, I think he threw 3 picks. 2 of them, especially the Pitts one against the Giants, was really not his fault. I actually thought Penix played really solid in the 3 games he played last season. He started last season. I think it was only 3 games, if I remember right. I think the offense actually could be really productive and one of the better offenses this year. My concern is kind of the defense. I think Falcons will probably have some good defensive games, and I think their defense is gonna. I don't think it'll be one of the worst, but I think it'll be sort of like the Commanders, somewhere probably 18 to 20-ish range, somewhere in that range, maybe even a bit less. I actually think Raheem Morris is a pretty good defensive coach, but I don't know. The Falcons had a bunch of pass rush issues last season that could continue, into this season. So yeah, the Falcons. I really could see them if things really click. I could maybe even see them being like a 9, maybe even 10-win team. But I had them at 7-10. I feel fairly confident with that number. I originally had them at 6-11. I'm like, I really think they'll at least get 7 wins, but who knows? I actually had them starting out 0-3. I think they'll lose to the Vikings. They very well could beat the Panthers and Bucs. I had them losing both those games, upsetting Washington, and then I had them beating the Bills in an upset off the bye week. That the Bills really should win that game, but again, that was one of the games going back. I'm like, all right, I'll give them a win there. I don't see them starting off, 1-7 here. So I'll give them 2 wins, 2-6 rather. Coming off the bye, maybe Raheem Morris. That's a game the defense plays well. I could see that. At San Fran, I think that's a loss, definitely. Miami, they could win. I think that'll be a loss, though. Then my team, I think that'll be a close game. I think we'll beat them there. Beating the Colts in Berlin could go either way. That literally will, when it actually comes to that game, unless injuries or anything like that, that'll be an extremely tough game. That's like a borderline coin flip game there. Honestly, the Colts probably should win that game, but who knows? Then I've been beating the Panthers, losing to the Saints in an upset. I think that'll be a game. The defense plays very poorly, and Kellen Moore and the Saints have a really good game there. Losing to the Jets, they probably should win that game. I think that'll be a good Aaron Glenn defensive game there. Beating the Seahawks in an upset, losing to the Bucs, Cardinals, then beating the Rams in an upset, and beating the Saints to end the year. So I had them at 7-10. Again, very slept on, sort of understandably, going into the year. But that offense, look out for Penix and company. Could be a very explosive offense. Oh, the Panthers. This is another tough team. I only had the Panthers at okay, yeah, I had the Panthers at 7-10, but I originally had them at 6-11. Like, I really think they'll get more wins than they did last year. And I only had them at only one more win than they got last year, but still, they get a fairly tough schedule. At Jacksonville, they very well could win that game to open the year. I think they'll. I have them losing it though. At Arizona, they could win, but I'll give the Cardinals the win there. I think the Cardinals, again, will probably be just pissed off at the way they played, according to my predictions, if it holds up against the Saints, and I don't think they'll start 0-2. And I have them losing to the Niners, so I really don't think they'll start 0-3, the Cardinals. So I'll give the Cardinals the win there. I have them beating the Falcons to get their first win of the year, losing to my team, the Patriots, beating the Dolphins. That I could see the defense for the Panthers having a rough showing against Hill and Waddle in that game, but I'll give them the upset there. I had them losing to the. Okay, just making sure. Yeah. Losing to the Cowboys there. Beating the Jets. Losing to the Bills, Packers. Beating the Saints. Losing to the Falcons, Niners, Rams. Beating the Saints again. Beating the Bucs. Losing to the Seahawks. And then losing to the Bucs. Losing to the Bucs. Okay, yeah, just making sure everything aligns here. And then beating the Bucs week 16, losing to the Seahawks week 17, and losing to the Bucs week 18. There we go. I think that'll probably be a big game for the Bucs trying to well, actually spoiler alert, but I had them already winning the division. But the Bucs, I don't think are gonna want to lose 3 games going into the playoffs there. So I'll give them the dub there. What else? Plus seeding wise, that might be impactful for the Bucs too. Yeah, the Panthers. They actually just also. I didn't even mention. I was just gonna say they just traded Thielen the Panthers. I didn't even mention the Parsons trade with Dallas. I almost recorded this video a couple days ago, and then obviously the Parsons trade happened. 2 days ago now? Obviously, their defense is going to take a hit. Although Kenny Clark, I think in Madden, he's like the greatest defensive tackle in history. He just freaking instantly sheds his blocks on every inside zone play call. It's absolutely ridiculous. He had a bit of an off year, you can say, last year. He's aging. He's got a big contract himself. Obviously, 2 first rounders will help for the Cowboys, but obviously losing Parsons is going to be a big loss for them there. But anyway, I'll talk about that with the Packers there. But yeah, the Panthers moving Thielen, I'm honestly surprised they moved Adam Thielen. There was rumors that I didn't think they'd actually move him. They did, so that takes a bit of a hit to their receiving core. Hunter Renfro, maybe they promote him. They just, uh, I believe he re-signed. I don't know if he re-signed on the roster or the practice squad. I know they cut him, but let's see here. Um, he's only 29 too, Hunter Renfro. Um, oh, Jalen Coker missed 4 to 6 weeks. I didn't see that. All right, so I think Jalen Coker actually was pretty solid last year, especially when the Panthers started to get it going offensively at the end of the year there, and Bryce Young played better after the bye there, that stretch. But Hunter, so I think they signed Renfro to the main roster. Obviously, we haven't seen him in a couple years, and he can still be pretty productive, I think. Leggett, I think he could have a good year. Um, what else? What else am I missing with the Panthers here? Why am I completely blanking on their Oh yeah, then they got Ted McMillan. That's who I'm trying to think of. Obviously, he could be. I'm not a big college guy, so I don't know much about him, but he could be a really productive receiver for them this year. Really good rookie year. Um, so the Panthers offense I actually think can be pretty solid. Their defense, I actually like Giro Everett. Actually, let me make sure they retained him. I believe they did. I'm still not in like football mode yet. Okay, it is Giro Everett. So yeah, I think Giro Everett's actually pretty solid DC. Obviously, the Panthers defense was a mess last year, especially stopping the run. They get uh, healthy this year. Had a lot of injuries last year, especially up front with the defensive line. So the Panthers defense could be pretty solid. This Panthers team, I honestly think they're going to play like they did the back half of the year when they were not one of the top, but one of the better teams in the league. It felt like it throughout that stretch. I think they'll play like that throughout the year. I think they'll probably just have some tough losses. They get a pretty tough schedule. If things really click, I could see them winning maybe around 10-ish games. If things really click, maybe 9 is a bit more likely. But I have them at 7-10. Um, yeah, I feel fairly comfortable with that number. Maybe 8-9, 9-8, is really realistic. But I think Bryce Young will have a good year. Panthers, I still think need another year, and they'll be, a pretty good team to contend for the division. I think. Okay, the Saints. I think the Saints we can kind of all agree on are going to have a rough year. However, even though the Saints, I had them at 4-13. Which by the way, maybe 3. I think is their floor. I actually feel fairly confident with 4, and obviously, they could very well go over that. You just need 5 wins to, go over the 4 mark. That was an idiotic. That was a duh statement. Now that I'm just said that out loud, it sounded better in my head. Um, the Saints defense this year, defensively on paper they look decent. Obviously, Brandon Staley kind of failed as the head coach of the Chargers. He got that job because he had the number 1 defense of the Rams in 2020. Obviously, the Rams I think had more a better defense on paper than the Saints this year, but the Saints defensively this year could be pretty solid. I think maybe not solid, but not as bad. As a lot of people predicting. I think their offense, they're going with Rattler. Obviously, the quarterback is rotation, and Rattler, I think, is going to be the problem for them. I Obviously last year was kind of a mess for the Saints outside of the first 2 weeks, and it looked like they were going to the Super Bowl and at the greatest show on turf offensively. Um, but Rattler, I don't think looked great last year. Kellen Moore, though, I think is a really good offensive coach. I think he'll develop Rattler, and this is assuming Rattler keeps the job throughout the year. Maybe not. Who knows? That offense, if Rattler, is like decent, if he's solid, the Saints could be like a potential sleep. Like I think they'll be bad no matter what, but they could be, a sleeper team to upset a good team or two. But I only have them at 4-13. Again, I think, however, they will beat the Cardinals week 1. That's an upset. My gut's kind of telling me. Then they get a brutal stretch. I think they'll definitely lose to the Niners, Seahawks, and Bills. Giants, they very well could win, but I think they'll lose that one. I think they'll lose to my team, the Patriots, and the Bears. Then I had them upsetting the Bucs, losing to the Rams and Panthers, beating the Falcons off the bye, losing to the Dolphins, Bucs, Panthers, have them beating the Jets, then losing to the Titans and Falcons. Yeah, Kellen Moore, just a rough situation, I think, for a rookie head coach. But sorry, I'm just getting a text here. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Um, okay, there we go. Anyway, so yeah, I have the Saints at 4-13. If things really click, maybe they at most could be like a 6-7 win team. But beyond that, I think is really stretching it. But they had the potential to be, a fairly decent bad team. Be more competitive than people are predicting them to, if that makes any sense. So these are my predicted standings for the NFC South. So I get the Bucs winning the division at 10-7, Falcons at 7-10, Panthers at okay. So actually, I lied. I only had the Panthers at 6 wins, so that's correct there. So scrap what I said about 7 wins. I only have them at 6 wins. Honestly, do I really only see them matching what they did last year? I think they'll be a better team than they were last year, but they just get a tough schedule. Whatever. I'll stick with 6-11, so I don't have to do some edits. This is actually my second time recording this video because I got to the NFC South in my last recording and I had so many edits that I had to pause it and redo things. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to scrap it entirely. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to scroll down there. Spoiler. So yeah, 6-11 for the Panthers. I'll just stick with it. Then I had the Saints in fourth at 4-13. Could see the Panthers leapfrogging the Falcons for second division, but I feel fairly confident that these will be the standings in the NFC South. Okay, moving over here to the NFC North. This is going to be a competitive division, I think. However, I actually have each of these teams at, well, maybe the exception of the Bears, kind of the juggernauts from last year, the Vikings, Lions, and then the Packers, were kind of the outlier if you want to talk about a juggernaut. But they were really good last year, too. The Packers, too, I'm going to kind of consider a juggernaut. I had them at less wins than I originally thought. I had Packers at 10-7. Now, do I really think they'll be a game worse than last year? I honestly think they'll be better. I just, the way the math works, I just have them at 10-7. They very well could be a lot better. Like I had them up losing to the Giants enough that they should win that. They very well could beat the Cardinals, probably should. So that's 12 they could get. Maybe they upset the Steelers. They may actually 12. 13, I think at most is their ceiling, but I think more realistically 12. I think their floor is probably 9s. I have them at 10, so somewhere in between there. I have them starting off hot, though. I have them beating the Lions, Commanders, Browns, and Cowboys, and the Bengals after the bye. So I have them at 5-0 to start the year. Now, is that really going to happen? Probably not, but whatever. I'll stick with it. Losing to the Cardinals, that a reason I losing to the Cardinals. I'm like, do I really only had them at one loss entering week 11? And I'm like, so I docked them there. I said maybe the Cardinals will beat them there. Plus, I wanted to give them the Cardinals a win because I had them at 7-10. I don't think they'll only finish at 7 wins. Losing to the Steelers, beating the Panthers, as I mentioned, beating the Eagles too. Losing to the Giants in upset, losing to the Vikings, losing to the Lions. Okay, yep, just making sure everything adds up here. Beating the Bears, beating Denver on the road, losing to Chicago. I think Ben Johnson will have a good offensive performance in that one. Losing to the Ravens and then beating the Vikings to end the year. I think that'll be a big game, and I'll talk about it when I get to the Vikings. I think that'll be a big game for the Packers and the Vikings, and I just trust the Packers more in that situation. In the big game to who's going to get the win. So honestly, I can't talk here. Matthew Golden, I think, will be really good for the Packers if they invest in a receiver. They're getting some. Their receiving core is kind of injured. If I at least maybe not, maybe maybe I'm thinking of some a different team, but Matthew Golden I think will be a stud for them. I think their offense will be similar to how it was last year. Matt LaFleur I think is arguably the most underrated head coach and offensive play caller in the whole league. I really love his offense and how he calls it. Jordan Love, that's kind of a concern I had. Jordan Love last year was banged up throughout the year. He came back, but he was clearly hampered at least at the start. Defensively, I think they'll be a pretty good defense. And by the way, I didn't change the Packers win-loss schedule at all from my original predictions after the Micah trade. However, when I was looking through the playoffs, actually I'll just save it for my playoff video there. Defensively, obviously adding Parsons is a major boost for them. That'll greatly help their pass rush there. Defensively, Jeff Hafley, I thought, did a great job last year. I think their defense will be solid again, although you could argue their secondary is a bit, after losing Alexander, even though he was, kind of a consistent theme with him injured for, a good portion of the year last year. You can argue their secondary, although McKinney was a stud for them last year. I'm sure he'll have another great year this year. Jeff Hafley, I think will have his defense playing good. I think the Packers will probably be better than they were last year, even though I have them finishing a game worse. So yeah, I have Packers at 10-7. I'm very optimistic on them this year, though. I think they'll be better than a typical 10-win team. The Lions. Okay, I have the Lions at 11-6. I actually originally had the Packers over the Lions. Then when I made some edits, I switched the Lions back to winning the division. I think after the Parsons trade, well, I know at least betting wise after the trade, the Packers are the favorites to win the division. I honestly think the Packers are more likely to win the division after that trade. However, I'll go a bit bold here and I'll still stick with the Lions winning the division. I think the Lions at the start of the year are going to have a rough adjustment period. Defensively, I think they'll miss Aaron Glenn, but not to the level of how much they'll miss Ben Johnson. Offensively, I think they're going to struggle at the well, maybe not struggle. That could be a bit of a stretch. I think they'll be inconsistent and have some adjustment pains from losing Ben Johnson at the start of the year. So I had them losing to the Packers week 1. I had them beating the Bears week 2, losing to the Ravens week 3, beating the Browns week 4. So again, kind of up and down. They're 2-2 entering week 5, losing to the Bengals, losing to the Chiefs, beating the Bucks, however. Then off the bye, beating the Vikings. So again, they're floating around. Let me show. So they're 4-3 entering the Washington game. Then they lose 2 in a row. So they're actually under 500. 12 weeks into the year. However, because I had them losing to the Commanders and the Eagles. Let me make sure that lines up. Okay, yep, that lines up. However, then I have them really clicking offensively and getting in stride. I had them winning out the rest of the regular season. I had them beating the Giants, Packers, Cowboys, Rams, Steelers, Vikings, and Bears. Now, I think they'll probably win the Giants, Green Bay, Dallas game. Rams game, I originally had them losing, but changed it. Pittsburgh, they very well could lose that. I think they'll win it, though. And then, again, kind of the same thing with the Packers. I think this will be a big game for the Vikings. I just trust the Lions more in this situation over what we've seen the past couple of seasons. And then big game to beat against the Bears at the end of the year. I have them winning it, too. So I have the Lions, I had the Lions at 11-6. But yeah, they're a tough team to predict. I have one YouTuber I watch that I really enjoy his content. He really knows his stuff about football. And is pretty accurate with most of his predictions. He has the Lions missing the playoffs. I honestly don't think that's too far fetched. Some people have the Lions, at another juggernaut year, 13 wins. I certainly don't think they'll get 15. Some of the one score, they're another team that pretty much every one score game they won last year, except really that Bucs game. I guess the Bills game too. I think they'll certainly lose some one score games this year rather than win, nearly all of them. I just think they're going to miss Ben Johnson. Defensively, I think they'll miss Aaron Glenn a little bit, but I think their defense will be pretty solid. Aiden Hutchinson, hopefully he can come back at an elite level too. That'll be good to watch. Hopefully he stays healthy. Knock on wood for him. Looks like he was going to win Defensive Player of the Year last year for the injury. But yeah, anyway, Lions at 11-6. They're a tough team to predict, though. Um, Actually, I guess the Lions. I know it is advanced to the Vikings, but the Lions. I think their floor is probably 9 wins, maybe 10. And their ceiling is probably around 12. I would say maybe 13, but probably 12. Vikings. They're another tough team to predict. Now, this is where I really am not too comfortable with my record prediction. I have the Vikings at 9-8. Now, on paper, they got better than they were last year. The line looks better. The defense looks better. They just traded for Thielen, so that's a boost for them and McCarthy and company. Even though Jordan Addison is suspended the first 3 weeks of the year. Obviously, hopefully Thielen can kind of cancel that out production wise at least. They look better on paper. However, kind of similar to the 22 season, I think the Vikings last year were a lot better than the 22 team. But the Vikings in 22 won so many one-score games in dramatic fashion, sort of similar, not to the extent of last year's team. I think was better and not necessarily earned the wins more. Maybe not earned isn't the best word, but there was less luck and like 50-50, plays going their way last year than it did in the 22 year. But I think the Vikings, and we saw the following year, they had some bad luck to open the year, had some tough losses in a dramatic fashion. I think they'll have some tough losses this year in one-score games. They're not going to win. I don't think they'll win 14 games, especially, with so many of them coming in dramatic fashion like last year. For me, the big question is J.J. McCarthy. How is he going to look? Now, I'm a Michigan fan, so I know a bit about J.J. McCarthy. I'm not a diehard Michigan fan. I'm kind of just a casual college football. I don't even want to say watcher. I don't even really watch much college football, but I keep up with I keep up with it. And I watch a Michigan game here or there, and the big games I'll tune in. Now J.J. McCarthy, obviously around Michigan, the what's the word I'm looking for here? The narrative, that's what I'm looking for, that word. The narrative around him is he just heavily benefited from the Michigan run game, and didn't have to sling the ball 500 yards a game or anything like that to win. Especially the Michigan defense was really good. Shout out Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh. So how is he going to look now? Obviously, a very limited I'm just trying to think. I don't think JJ McCarthy played in the first preseason game this year. Let me see though. Let me see here really quick. Let's see. I know he didn't play in the second and third game. Did he play against the Texans? Actually, I think he did. All right, 4-7 for 30 yards. So not the best, not the worst. And again, that's just me looking at the stats for that game. I rewatched all the preseason highlights anyway. I haven't gotten to that game yet, so I'll have to get to that game soon anyway. But in its very limited action, the P looked really solid in the preseason, last season. And he was going to start last year too. If there's a coach that is Kevin O'Connell's kind of a quarterback whisperer, so JJ McCarthy could have a really solid year with Kevin O'Connell calling plays for him. And again, on paper, this Vikings team, they won 14 games last year. I don't think they'll, again, win that this year. They got better than they did last year. I just think they're going to have some close losses. I really don't think they'll get blown out in any games. Maybe that Philly game, they'll have a bad loss. Maybe the Detroit game, they have a bad loss. That Baltimore game, Detroit, both games will probably be relatively close, like they always are the past couple of years. It feels like. I don't know. I originally the Vikings at 10-7. Then when I was doing my edits, I'm like, I docked them one at the end of the year, I think. Now, most of these last two games are what I'll talk about, but I'll go through the schedule quickly here. I had them losing to the Bears to open the year, beating the Falcons, Bengals, and then they play the Steelers in Ireland. So I had them winning those games. They very well could lose. I think they'll beat the Falcons. They very well could lose to the Bengals and Pittsburgh, but I'll give them wins there. They could beat the Bears on the road. I think the Bears will win that one. The NFL. Okay, so I had them losing to the Browns. Because if you look at the Browns' schedule here, my prediction, this is the only one I had the Browns getting up until week 12. Now, do I really think the Browns are going to go winless up until week 12? No. So I gave them that win. And another part of that is because the NFL kind of screwed over the Vikings. They play in Ireland week 4, and then they have to go to London. So two international games. That's really going to probably mess with the body clock there, the Vikings and their players, and maybe even their staff. So why not? I'll give the Browns an upset win there. Add them losing to the Eagles after the bye, beating the Chargers. That game can go either way. The Chargers game. I think they'll lose to the Eagles, though. Really should beat the Browns. And again, I'll get the Browns an upset win there. I had them losing to the Lions, the Ravens, going on a bit of a win streak here, being the Bears, Packers, Seahawks, and Commanders. Could have lose to the Commanders. I actually think they'll win that game, though. I feel decent in that. Saying that, could have lose to the Seahawks. I think that'll be a close game like it was last year in Seattle. I think they'll beat the Packers on the road. Maybe a bit of a shocker. I have them splitting, but usually I have it vice versa, that the team winning the home game rather than the away game. Have them beating the Bears. I don't think the Bears will sweep them. I have them losing at Dallas to end the win streak. Dallas fighting for the playoffs. Big win there, and a losing streak to end their losing streak. Excuse me here. I have them beating the Giants. I have them, and then so going into the last 2 weeks of the year, I have them at 9-6. Now they could beat both those teams. They very well. Hang on here, let me. Okay, no, good. That does align with the Giants' my schedule there. They very well could beat both these teams. However, what have we seen from the Vikings the past 2 years? They had a big game against the Packers week 17, where if you win, all you have to do is win week 18 and you're in, and they got blown out. They played absolutely terrible. Last year, week 18, to win the 1 seed against the Lions, they played awful, got blown out. So that's 2 years in a row now where a high stakes game, either the second to last week or the last week of the regular season. Not that I don't want to say they choked, but they lost in embarrassing fashion. So I think this will be a big game for the Lions playing for seeding in the division. I think they'll win that, the Lions. I just trust them more in a high stakes game like that. And then same with the Packers. I just trust the Packers more than the Vikings in a high stakes game, especially with rookie J.J. McCarthy. But J.J. McCarthy is the big question mark. Again, I could see the Vikings. I think at most they'll be like a 12-win team. Their 4, I think their 4 is probably 9 wins. I have them at 9 wins. So I guess I have their 4. Maybe 8 of things. J.J. McCarthy really struggles, but who knows there. So yeah, I have them at 9-8. That is one I'm uneasy on. I do think their defense will play extremely well this year, the Vikings. I think it might take a slight step back than it did or from last season rather. But yeah, the Vikings are a tough one for me there. Another tough team. The whole NFC North is tough. The Bears. I have the Bears at 8-9. I kind of feel confident around that number. I think their ceiling is probably 11 wins, and I think their 4 is probably 7. I want to say maybe 6. But I had them at 8-9. I feel kind of confident with that. I think their offense will be up and down throughout the year. It'll have some weeks it looks great, some weeks it struggles. Their defense, I think, will be pretty consistent though throughout the year. I really like the Dennis Allen hire defensively. Obviously, it did not work out when he was the head coach of the Saints, but as a defensive coordinator, he's been really solid for most of his career. I think, and apparently the reports coming out of training camp are for the Bears that their defense is playing extremely well. So I think the Bears defense will be solid this year, and their offense will have up and down weeks. I think they'll have a good week 1 against the Vikings. I think they'll win that game. I had them losing to the Lions the second week, beating the Cowboys the third week. I have them losing to the Raiders. They really should win that game. I think, if you watch part one of my little mini series here with the AFC, I think the Raiders will be a tough team early on in the year. Let me make sure that. Oh, okay, good. That aligns there with my Raiders prediction. I have them losing to the Commanders after the bye. Very well could win that game. I've been beating the Bears. So again, I had them at 3-3 at this point. Then losing to the Ravens. Or sorry, hang on. I've been beating the Saints, losing to the Ravens. Beating the Bengals, Giants. They very well could lose that game to the Bengals, and they very well could beat the Commanders though. But I'll stick with my predictions here. Losing to the Vikings, beating the Steelers, losing to the Eagles, Packers, beating the Browns, Packers. And again, at this point, I have them at 8-7 entering the last 2 weeks of the year. So they could finish 10-7, maybe make the playoffs. However, they play the Niners on the road. That'll be a big game for the Niners. I think they'll lose that one. And then Detroit, again, high pressure situation. I just trust Detroit in that game. Now, Ben Johnson, I have them beating the. Do I have? Actually, I had the Lions sweeping though. I originally had the Bears splitting with the Lions, but I'll just stick with this prediction for now. I must have made that in my I remember. I made that in my edits. The Bears, this entire division, obviously at least one team's going to make it, but you can honestly argue that the 3 wild card spots could go to this whole division if things really go right for the NFC North. I think definitely at least 2 teams in this division will make it. Oh, sorry, I'm getting another text here. I think at least 2 teams will make it for sure. But the Bears, I think, similar to the Vikings, will be in position if they win out to make the playoffs, and I just trust the other teams more in those situations. But the Bears definitely a step in the right direction. Sleeper team going into this year. Look out for the Bears. So these are my standings I have for the NFC North. I have the Lions winning the division at 11-6, the Packers at 10-7, in second, the Vikings at 9-8, which again I'm very uneasy on. And maybe a bit bold even, and then the Bears at 8-9. I feel good around 8 wins for the Bears. I think the Vikings will get third, the Bears will get fourth. 1 and 2, I'm very split on the Lions and Packers. And again, after the Micah trade, honestly, the Packers, I know now that they're favored to win the division betting wise, but I'll stick with it is bold of me to predict the Lions to just kind of figure things out and go on a win streak to end the year. Because at this point, the division is, well, according to my predictions here, actually these teams will be very close. The division's pretty much up for grabs at this point. When the Lions go on their win streak, according to my predictions here, just quickly eyeballing it, and then I think the Lions will get hot at the end of the year and win out. So I've been winning 7 in a row, so that's a bit bold of me, I think. But yeah, I just think the Lions will figure it out. Packers, do I really see them getting a game worse win-loss wise than last year? I guess so. But I think they'll be a better team, even though that kind of contradicts it. But whatever, I'll stick with it. So these are my NFC standings here, seeding wise. So I have the Eagles at the 1 seed, 12-5. The Rams at 2, also 12-5. The Eagles beat them in my predictions here, which is why they have the 1 seed. The Lions at 3 at 11-6. The Bucks and 4 at 10-7. So those are the 4 division winners. The Niners is the first wild card team at 11-6. The second wild card team, the Packers, 10-7. Then I have the Commanders at the 7th seed at 10-7. Then I had the Vikings at 9-8, just missing out. The Cardinals at 8-9. Chicago at 8-9. Dallas at 8-9. Then Atlanta at 7-10. Seattle, Carolina at 6-11. Then the Giants at 5-12. And then the Saints at 4-13. And then I have 1 through 7 bolded. So those are the 7 teams from the NFC I'm predicting to make the playoffs here. So yeah, this will wrap up my part 2. You want to call it that, prediction video for the NFL season here. I'll probably just record in a bit once I get this video uploaded my awards and playoffs predictions, part 3, to end my multi-part series here, if you want to call it that. Finish that out. Hopefully you enjoyed. Feel free to comment what you think about my predictions. I'm sure I'll get some hate if that's the case, but I went bold, but I think for the most part it aligns with what most people probably have. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good one, guys.